The byline of what I'm going to share really could be titled From Guessing to Gauging to Guiding. When Muzzy Rosenblatt first started at BRC 12 years ago, he, like all of you, knew in your jobs when you were new, you went around and you saw what the organization was doing, and you asked questions. So what do you do, and how many do you serve, and how well do you do? And everybody was very positive. Oh, we're great, and we serve so many, and life is good, right? It's the new boss. And so then he asked one question, and it was the question over and over and over again: how do you know, right? How do you know? Well, that was all very unclear. So we were good people 12 years ago. We had our heart in the right place. We were hardworking as an organization, and we knew a lot. But from a management perspective, using data, and particularly trying to scratch the surface of performance, we were really just guessing. And good guesses sometimes, sincere guesses, but guesses nonetheless. So we had a data management system, the one you enjoyed at your previous organization. I think these two folks as well. I'm excited to hear. Get ready, they're the headliners, okay? But what we found at the time, what Muzzy found at the time, is we weren't really using it. We were using it only superficially and not in every program, so we weren't making the most of the tools that we had available to us at the time. I don't know if that rings familiar with any of you. I see a couple of heads nodding. Feel free to nod if you'd like throughout. And so he recommitted the organization to the tools, maybe not as comprehensive as we want, with the tools that we had at the time. And then we were able to dedicate a resource. All right, it wasn't a big resource, one full-time position, but dedicate a resource aimed at program data management and evaluation. Not research, but day-to-day program data management and evaluation. And so we began to create a data-informed, robust, adapting, and organic performance management system at BRC. So let me back up one thing, one minute. BRC now is about $55 million in annual revenue, about 25 programs serving 10,000 folks annually with about 600 staff. Undoubtedly, some of you are much bigger than that. But it's enough to say grace over, right? 25 programs throughout the city, yeah, it's a lot to keep up with. And so when we started to lift this, when the folks at the time started to lift this, it wasn't an easy lift at all. And as Mark described, there was a lot of concern and trepidation about, I'm a social worker, I'm not a data person, and what is that all about? And in order to move from wherever you are in the beginning to where you want to be, that vision of the future of a fully integrated, robust, comprehensive, top to bottom used performance management system, it takes persistence and it takes patience, right? Yeah, patience. We've been doing this for over 10 years and we're not where we want to be yet. I think we're getting there, and I'm happy with our results so far. It also takes an unshakable, ferocious commitment from the top, right? The top's got to set the vision and be clear about it and unwavering. Now, the zen of that is the top's got to mandate it, make it happen, inspire to get it, and then let go of it, right? How many of you have been with bosses or chief program officers like me who wanted to meddle with what you wanted to do in your early career, right? Doesn't always work. Excuse me. For us, in order for the team to build this beginning of a management system, they had to be free to make mistakes, to kind of putz around with it, to start and stop, and to reassess with that full-time resource that we'd carved out. The notion was they had to build it in order to own it. And owning this and being committed to a performance management system is critical. Now, there are varying degrees of that. Not everybody's got to be a zealot from day one. I appreciate that. And folks weren't. Of the programs we had at the time, some jumped out quicker than others, and we were patient with that. It wasn't by X date everybody has to be. We had the luxury of that at the time. Maybe you don't, or maybe you have not. But that's something that worked well for us. So those that were naturally attenuated to it, they moved in that direction. Others watched cautiously, worriedly sometimes. But we let them move on their own, at their own pace to some degree. We started very simply about what do we want to count? Now, our funding regulations, our licensure regulations, our internal mechanisms that existed at the time informed that, but it wasn't only that. What are all those great ideas that we have, you know, that we talk about late at night or early in the morning, or not so much early in the morning, to try and do what we want to do that go beyond the funder? We had to count all that and get concrete about it. And at BRC, we created a logic model design system. Some of you have used that undoubtedly. I think it had to do with the fact that Muzzy was the product of the Wagner School of Public Service, and our first director of evaluation was as well. And that's kind of a core aspect of what they teach in performance management. And so we got together as teams and program directors, and they talked about inputs and outputs and outcomes and all of that stuff. And every program, 25 programs at BRC, has a logic model that underpins the performance management system for each program. We also have an agency-wide logic model that tries to roll it up together. We utilize the system, as I mentioned, that we had at the time. We've continued to adapt to that, or make adaptations to that to the extent we can. And we test drove what we did. And we looked at this logic model, we looked at the inputs, the outputs, we started to touch and scratch the surface of outcomes. And so we created what we lovingly call now is the big ugly. All right? It's this one page that's jam-packed with more data than you could ever want to put your head around in one sitting. And so that was our plateau for the next several years. It was helpful. We were looking at a lot of numbers. We were crunching them to a large degree, right? This is a crunching number. So we're doing a lot of that. And we felt pretty good about it most of the time. But from a management team perspective, nobody felt like both feet were firm on the ground, right? There was no direction to it. There was no guiding principle or method or system to communicate about it. There wasn't a common language really between the programs, right? If they were transitional housing shelters, they kind of talked the same program language. If they're OMH funded community residents, they kind of talked the same language, but we didn't have an agency language around performance management. So we started about 6 years ago to take what we'd done, that big ugly, that jam-packed form, and distill it and create dashboards, right? We all got dashboards, right? We know that, that's cool, dashboard. Just a few things. Those 4 or 5 or 6 bottom lines that are most outcome-oriented for us. But I think the most important thing we did is we said to the management team at the time, everybody's got a life vest, okay? Nobody's gonna drown, unless, of course, you take the vest off, right? So as long as you're tethered, as long as you're connected to this, as long as you want to be in the water, then we're gonna get through this together. And we created a method, a structure, that let them avoid throwing this big ugly up on the screen monthly or quarterly, and then staff just looking and asking random questions about it. And you know, you had to stay on your toes, and it was all just too stressful for folks. Even though they had a pretty good understanding of what they did, we taught the team to distill and look at key data. What really matters? Not the big ugly with 50,000 different data points, but that dashboard, the things that really are outcome oriented. Now, guiding principle there was, we work for BRC, we work for the agency. We talk a lot in our performance management meeting of getting the elephant out of the room. Department of Homeless Services, big elephant in the room. OMH, very big elephant in the room. So we shooed the elephants out of our management meetings, figuratively, in our mind, and said, we work for us. What's important to us? Now, servicing the needs of the elephant, get it, check, but it's not just about that. So key data was very important to hone in on, and I was very rigorous about that. You know, you gotta be big picture to a degree. You've got to be focused on what the outcomes are. So if you bring to me 15 or 20, you're not going to work. I wanted a short list of things that really make a difference. And then we taught our team how to bring context to that data, right? Data without any context, without any connection, without any relevance to our work is just numbers. So we spent a lot of time on teaching the notion of understanding context. And then Mark spent some time talking about a critical issue, and that's analyzing work. It's just not about numbers. It's just not about staying up all night to get the data. It's about that next morning when you're really focusing on what the data means. You have it, it's key. You understand the context, but you drill down and look at what's driving that. What's pushing that number up or down, or sideways in some cases, right? At BRC, we teach that up is not necessarily good and down is not necessarily bad. And this is an important feature, I think, for anybody who's launching into this, or if you're already doing it, just check your pulse on this. In any way, are you creating a situation where managers are working or managing to a number instead of with the numbers? Does that make sense? All right? I'm a big believer. Where I come from, life is more simple than New York City. Bonus points to those of you who can tell where my accent's from. But it's important that we understand that it's not about just meeting the mark, but about understanding how we met it in the cases where we did, how we exceeded it if it can be described in those terms, or how we missed it. We don't spend much energy at all about we missed it, we made it, we exceeded it. We spend tons of energy on understanding it. What's driving our work? What made things happen for us, or what didn't? How am I doing on time? Not so good. All right, I'm going to wrap this up quick because these next two folks are going to knock your socks off, okay? When we were able to get to that point with a structure and a method, with an overarching set of guiding principles or ethos around not managing to numbers but with numbers, when we were rigorous about using it on a quarterly basis in meetings, we taught them how to make the presentation too, right? Some people are better presenters than others. You're thinking, yeah, really, right now. Right? But we taught them how to do that in this way, create a level of comfort there. So it wasn't really about style. It was about, again, understanding the work. And that was an important piece. And we did that on a quarterly basis. We did some work on a monthly basis. But when we knew we arrived at this, when we knew we were really focusing on performance issues, and when we knew the team had gotten it, was when they were using it in their daily work to help guide how they approached a problem, how they prevented a problem, how they maintained a level of effort or outcome. When we started seeing it, when we started hearing the language, the common language that we arrived at, day to day, week to week, that's when we knew we're getting there. We're not there yet. We got a ways to go. But I think that's the level of maturation that's important to get to at some point. For us, it took 10 years. So my hope is for those of you who've been doing that, you well exceed what we're doing at BRC. And for those of you who are embarking on it, I hope you can chew it down a little more quickly. But it does take time. It's a process that's got to evolve, and be patient with it. Thanks.